Hey guys, Hello Bella here. I'm going to be doing a book review / discussion with you guys about a book called Lost in the Shuffle, The Codependent Reality. This book is written by a guy named Robert Subby, and he has a pretty great photo on the back. If you can see that there, he's got a full-on mustache. Definitely a book that came out in the 80s. Actually, I do believe it was 1987 that it came out. Yeah, 1987. So this book is over 30 years old, so please take that into consideration when listening to this review and discussion, because I felt like most of the book was relevant, but there were some parts that are a little bit dated that I will bring up as we get through the book review. The reason that I want to bring up a topic like codependency on my channel is because I have been working through this as an adult, kind of seeing how I have some codependent tendencies, and it's definitely good to bring about an awareness to problems in your life, especially problems that can create problematic relationship dynamics later on in life. And I thought this was a great way to kind of explore this topic. Now, a little bit about this book. This book is mainly talking about the characteristics of what is a codependent person, and how do these symptoms develop in the family? How does this go about from childhood? It's not so much the codependent that we think of when we think of an alcoholic, or you have the alcoholic and then the battered woman who deals with the alcoholic. So she would be the codependent in that situation. But for the author of this book, he actually was a codependent as a child and then later became an alcoholic. So he actually dealt with both sides of the spectrum, which I felt like was a really interesting perspective, because a lot of the times that the codependent person feels like they're the person who has to be in control, where the other person might be causing a lot of trauma, a lot of issues for the family. The codependent person is a lot of times the one who will take charge of the situation and make sure that everything else in the family stays on track and kind of covers for the person who is suffering from some kind of addiction. Just overall, I would rate the book a 4 out of 5 just off the top of this. This book is not a really popular codependency book. A lot of the books that you're going to find for codependency are Codependent No More, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and even The Body Keeps the Score is kind of a book that gets recommended for codependence. So this book is not super famous when it comes to codependency, but I think that one of the things that struck me to read the whole thing in 2 days was the perspective of the author being really down to earth, not really so much a clinician, but more of a friend, kind of talking to you about like, how does this come about in our life? Is this my fault, or is it my fault that I choose to stay this way? And one of his actual main nuggets of advice and main arguments is that a child becomes codependent through no fault of their own, but an adult stays codependent through their own choosing. So once you become aware of your own codependency, it's kind of your job to fix it. You cannot blame your parents when you are 30 years old for your unhealthy relationship dynamics. So I thought that was a really good point made by the author pretty early on in the book. One thing I found pretty interesting was the way that people can become codependent, and he says that there's 4 main types. It can be from alcoholism and chemical dependency within the family. That would be my dog shaking it out. It could be from emotionally or psychologically disturbed family systems, which you kind of think of mental illnesses, things like that, bipolar, schizophrenia, anything that caused or wreaked havoc within the household, especially when there were children present. Then the third way is physically abusive, sexually abusive family systems. So that is kind of self-explanatory. Doesn't necessarily have to be the mom or dad abusing the child. It could definitely be a distant family member or a grandparent or something like that. But it would basically cause the whole family dynamic to revolve around the abuse. And then the fourth way is fundamentalistic or rigid dogmatic family, so the over-controlled family systems, and that would be kind of what I would think of as like maybe a military family, or a family with a teacher who is always on top of their children like they're their students. Basically family, or a lot of families with a lot of rules. Think fundamentalist Christian families, or perhaps families where the father was a preacher and the whole family had to feel like they were always staying in line with the rules. So those are kind of the 4 ways that you could kind of become a codependent as a child. And of course, you can develop codependency later on in life, but those are some of the symptoms that he says that revolve around the family system that kind of put you in that bracket of codependency early on in life. I highlighted something that's kind of funny here. It says the codependent is constantly pretending that things are fine even when things are falling apart. So if you grew up in a codependent household, that probably rang true for you as well. Personally, my parents didn't really address anything that was going on. It was sort of like all not really talked about. And that's another thing in this book. He says that codependent codependent families kind of have that don't talk about it rule. Don't talk about it to other people, don't talk about it to each other, and everything kind of just gets pushed down, and we would like to believe that we are completely in control of things, and in reality everything is just falling apart. And another thing that he speaks about in this book is that when you come from a codependent family, later on in life you develop addiction issues, binge eating, alcohol, can't stop gambling. You develop those things as a result of coping with the everyday stress of life because you don't really know how to go about your adult life properly. Now, I really hate to just read off something from a book, but I think that this is worth noting because these are the symptoms in codependence that are very, very true for most of us. Difficulty in accurately identifying feelings, difficulty in expressing feelings, difficulty in forming or maintaining close relationships, perfectionism, unrealistic expectations for yourself and for others. I know I certainly have that one. Rigidity in behavior or attitudes, difficulty in adjusting to change, feeling overly responsible for other people's behavior and feelings. I know a lot of us have that one. I personally have that one, and it's something that I've tried to work on for probably a decade to kind of separate my feelings from other people's feelings. Constant need for other people's approval to feel good about yourself, difficulty making decisions, feeling powerless as if nothing you do makes any difference, a basic sense of shame and low self-esteem, and the avoidance of conflict. So those are the 12 kind of tenets of codependency. So obviously you probably won't have all of them. You may only have 2 or 3 of them. For someone like me, I think I had about half of them. So it kind of just depends, and it also depends on your awareness. One of the big reasons that I read books like this is not necessarily to fix myself, but to kind of better understand some of the problems that I'm bringing into my own life. And I personally believe that like awareness of something is the first step to solving the problem. In the book, he also goes on to say that we create problems for ourselves with these behaviors. We gradually deny much of who we are and what we really are, always alert and focused on others to get our needs met. We never have time to focus on ourselves in any other than a superficial way. And this has consequences for how we see ourselves, how we view others, and how we get along in the world. Another thing that I highlighted was every detail becomes a major issue. We begin to believe that every mistake we make is both a personal reflection of who we are and what we're worth. Wow, heavy stuff. But anyone who has put a lot of stock into their work or put a lot of stock into their image or their credentials definitely has those tendencies to kind of view themselves as their profession. For instance, if you are a scientist, you might not be Joey anymore, you're Joey the scientist. So you identify with your career and you get a lot of your worth out of putting those titles on yourself. So you can kind of see how you get separated from who you actually are, which is just the person versus the scientist. And I don't think it's bad or unhealthy to want to achieve things in life, but a big thing with us codependents is we think if we achieve all of this stuff in life, then everything else will be fine. We'll be okay, things will work themselves out, we'll regain control, nobody will know that what's really going on inside our heads. And that is an issue for me too, is kind of having that ability to kind of feel like everything's on track, but I also feel in another way like everything is falling apart. Like you are trying desperately to convince everyone else that you have it together. So here we have a list of the reasons that people get stuck in codependency, and if you want, you can just pause the screen here and then you'll have that list. But some of the reasons that I highlighted were that it's not okay to talk about or express your feelings openly. Again, the unrealistic expectations, always be strong, always be good, always be perfect, always be happy. For me and my family, it was not acceptable to cry ever. And as an adult, I really still can't cry properly because I wasn't allowed to cry as a child. Anytime that I cried when I was younger, it was met with something like, oh, there's no reason to cry, dry the tears up, I'll give you something to cry about. And while it can be a little bit funny in retrospect, I definitely realized that like some of my emotional capacities were stifled because of the way that I was raised. And I'm 26 years old, so I'm guessing this is even more prevalent in people who are my age and older. Thankfully now we are becoming more aware of our feelings and kind of realizing like the point of raising a well-rounded person is raising someone who does have the capabilities to address their feelings and not be completely emotional, but also not be completely logical. Because I think the happy part is somewhere in the middle of logic and emotion is where most people need to be living their lives. Another thing I highlighted, don't be selfish. and it's not okay to play or be playful. So the selfish thing is an interesting word, right? Because in codependent families, basically any attempt at trying to do your own thing is met with some kind of anger or frustration from the other parties. Personally, when I've stepped away from toxic family situations, toxic family members, I was met with anger. You think you're better than me, or you think that you're too good for us, or you don't love us anymore, when really in action I was just refusing to participate in some of the toxic family back and forth, and by separating myself from that, I became a target for, oh, you think you're better than us. So I think it's really interesting to see that word selfish, because big part of being selfish is, like the word, looking out for oneself. We have to do that as codependents in order to heal, in order to fully move on, especially when you dealt with a tumultuous childhood where things were constantly going wrong, things were constantly falling at the plate of your feet. I know for me as a child, I was given responsibilities far greater than what I could personally handle from a young age, and I began to think that everything was on me. It was all on me to fix everything, to do everything, to be the communicator for the family, to keep everyone happy, to keep everyone safe, and eventually to provide financial assistance to a lot of the family. So I can definitely see how don't be selfish would play into people who get stuck in that codependent mindset, especially those who have the ability to help their family, because a lot of us, we go on, we get professional jobs, we make more money. It's not that we can't spend money on our family, but it's really that we really shouldn't spend money on them if we're going to be enabling them. Here's another interesting thing that I highlighted. Okay, live and let live is perhaps the most difficult principle for us to practice as codependents, because we need and want to control everything. The codependent spends a great deal of time trying to control what is often uncontrollable. Little things, like other people. If you live in a codependent family system, you probably remember one person trying to get another person to do something. For sure, there was a lot of issues in my family of trying to keep people on track, or trying to keep people sober, or trying to keep people out of trouble. This says the codependent often tries to get personal needs met through manipulating or taking care of others. So we look at it as like, I'm the one who's doing well. I'm in control here. I'm the one who's fixing the situation. I'm the one who's saving you. You need me. And these are all things that, you can tell yourself when you're taking care of someone else, but that other person doesn't care one way or the other if you're there or not. They're too caught up in their addiction to really even realize what's going on. With you trying to put out fires every single day, this person is too caught up in their addiction to even see your role in the relationship. Now, the main reason that I did give this book a 4 out of 5 was because towards the end, he kind of trails off a bit in the last third of the book. There aren't as many tips on how to beat codependency, but I still think this is an amazing resource on what codependency looks like, how it starts and how it's formed, and how it is maintained throughout the family system. So for someone like me who was kind of aware of a lot of this, it just brings back into focus, maybe that it wasn't my fault that this has happened, but it is my responsibility to kind of seek out a better way of living, to teach my children, if I have children, a better way of dealing with their feelings, and just kind of like gives me something to work on in life for just the whole expressing yourself. So overall, definitely worth the read. I found this for $2 at McKay's bookstore in Nashville. So this was definitely a cheap copy, but you can probably get it for around $10 on Amazon. Hopefully you guys like the review. Again, please give it a thumbs up if you got something out of it. It is kind of hard to share stuff like this, but I feel like if one person watches the video and they feel kind of similar to how I feel, then it is worth it in the end. So yeah, take care guys. I will catch you in the next video.